At issue this Sunday, the presidential race. Former President Trump's position on abortion evolves again. His latest shift leads to some rare public criticism from Republicans.
President Biden looks to seize on the opposition to abortion bans to win re-election. Will this plan work?
Plus, I go one-on-one with House Minority Whip Catherine Clark on the dysfunction in the House of Representatives. At issue starts now. Good Sunday morning and welcome to another edition of At Issue. I'm Matt Pritchard in for Corey Smith.
And I'm Sue O'Connell. Coming up, we're looking at some of the important issues through the prism of the presidential race. They could be the decisive factors this November.
But first, a look back at what was at issue this past week.
More money could be on the way for the T. So that's because the House budget plan includes $739 million for public transit agencies.
The Biden administration is working to cancel more student debt. According to the White House, the new plans would provide student debt relief to more than 30 million Americans.
Meanwhile, a legal loss for the former president. His hush money trial will go on as scheduled.
Former Trump executive Allen Weisselberg was sentenced to 5 months in Rikers Island prison. The former chief financial officer of the Trump Organization pleaded guilty last month for lying under oath during Donald Trump's civil fraud trial.
And a former Holyoke City councilor is making some international headlines. This is video from a Russian TV network appearing to show Wilmer Pueo Mota signing a military contract to fight against Ukraine.
We're going to take a look at the issues that could decide the presidential race, starting with abortion.
Yeah, a major ruling last week in a closely watched battleground state brought more attention to this issue. Of course, the Arizona Supreme Court ruled a near total abortion ban from 1864 is still enforceable. That makes abortion illegal in nearly all circumstances, with no exceptions for rape or incest.
And when it comes to abortion, former President Trump has changed his stance a number of times. To borrow a line from the late Senator Ted Kennedy, President Biden is pro-choice, Donald Trump, multiple choice.
Now, but last week, after months of sending mixed signals, Trump releasing a video saying that abortion rights should be left up to the states. Take a listen.
Many states will be different. Many will have a different number of weeks, or some will have more conservative than others, and that's what they will be. You must follow your heart of this issue, but remember, you must also win elections to restore our culture.
That announcement led some Republicans to publicly criticize Mr. Trump. Trump's Vice President Mike Pence, he called the move a slap in the face to anti-abortion voters.
Now, joining us to talk much more about this issue, as well as the presidential race, are Jaquetta Van Zandt, host of the Politics and Prosecco podcast, and Wendy Wakeman, a Republican strategist. Thanks to both of you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Matt, Sue.
Exactly. Yeah, we're both here. That's a good thing. Wendy, let's start with you and talk about this announcement from former President Trump. Did this cost him voters, or how do you think the base is seeing this?
I'm not sure how it's going to cost him in the long run. One thing is clear. Trump is a hero to the pro-life movement. I don't think they were expecting to hear these words, but at the same time, he delivered to that group of voters something that they honestly have worked 50 years for and never expected to have.
Jaquetta, he has to move on to the general election, though, and polling showing that, a lot of Americans are against more restrictions on abortion. He is taking credit for the Dobbs ruling, and that, by all objective measures, hurt Republicans in the 2022 midterms. What's the path here? What needle is he trying to thread?
I think he's speaking to a Republican base of women. He really struggles with this group. If you remember in the last election, it was like, suburban women, will you love me? And I think that he's trying to bring them back into the fold. The problem is that this is an issue for women as a monolith. These issues about bodily autonomy and health care matter to all women, whereas the data shows us that more white women are, more likely to have an abortion or to make that choice, whereas women of color, the numbers aren't as high. So he's going to have to focus on those women and really what means something to them. And this is an issue that is important to them, just like the IVF issue. So if he wants to talk to them, he's going to have to start speaking their language, and this ain't it.
Well, let's take a look at this. The Biden campaign is well aware that surveys show that about 2/3 of Americans say abortion should be legal, so they're taking a page from the 2004 campaign playbook of George W. Bush. Mr. Bush won re-election in part because of ballot initiatives that rallied voters in key swing states against a hot-button social issue, that being same-sex marriage. Allies of the president are putting abortion rights on the ballot in swing states like Pennsylvania, Florida, Arizona, Nevada. Right now, 13 states will have abortion on the ballot.
Wendy, do you think having abortion on the ballot in some of these swing states could actually help President Biden get elected and win those states?
certainly don't think it helps President Trump. I think it's such an emotional issue. We haven't developed a way to speak about it as a culture. Not, you pointed out that women of color are more likely to stay away from abortions personally than white women. And that's such an interesting fact, right? We haven't had these discussions because we haven't had to. There's been a lot of yelling, but not a lot of getting to what we need to get to, which is emotional connection. I don't know if Donald Trump can do that. He may be able to do that, though.
Jaquetta, anything you want to add on that?
No, I think she's spot on, and I just want to make the correction. It's not that most women of color won't make that choice. It's just that they may not have the access to make such a choice all the time, and it's just semantics, and I get that.
No, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. It's such an emotional issue, and that neither party has made the right words or put the right words together to have the conversation. What I'm hoping is this will bring women to the table, white and black and Asian and Latinx women, to talk about bodily autonomy. That's, to me, what the core of this issue is.
All right, we're going to shift gears and take a look at President Biden's response to the Israel-Gaza war. He faces significant criticism for his support of Israel as the Palestinian civilian death count has continued to skyrocket.
Yeah, according to health officials in Gaza, nearly 35,000 civilians have been killed. Delivery of food and medical aid to Palestinians has been delayed there. And of course, there are concerns that the conflict could spread to Syria, Iran, and even beyond that.
Jaquetta, do you think that President Biden has been effective as a global leader around the Israel-Gaza conflict?
I really don't think so. I think this is his sort of Achilles heel. He has not had the right messaging around this. It's often too late, or people are just, he can't please everyone, and I think he's trying to. And I think what is going to be so significant as we gear up towards this general election is people want to hear how he's going to resolve this.
Wendy, how do you view the president's handling of this crisis?
I think that Donald Trump is going to win on these overseas conflicts every time. When Trump was president, we just didn't have this sort of violence in the world. We didn't have the Ukraine, we didn't have Israel, and it had a lot to do with his stance and his general demeanor, right? It kept peace in the world in a way that didn't hold once Biden became president. We find in the Republican Party that our younger voters come to the party mainly because they are very isolationist. It's in conflict with the older members of the party. It's a very important bloc for Trump, and I think it's going to be big.
Some might say that Trump's stance on Israel, kind of some of the things he did that appeased Israel around things that they wanted might have set the table for this, and appeasement of Putin may have embodied him to be able to take action like this. What's your answer to that?
I would say appeasement is a bad word. Let's go somewhere else in the world, to Korea, and talk about how before Trump was elected in 2016, we were terrified that missiles in North Korea were aimed at the United States and maybe even could come here to Massachusetts. That was the daily toll that we heard. Well, once Trump was elected, he did this dance with Kim Jong-il and made friends with the leader and quieted the North Korean tension. I would say that he has a different way of dealing with international tension that you might characterize as appeasement, but I might characterize as advanced diplomatic skills that really served the country well.
Jaquetta?
Yep.
I don't understand how you can allow that into your stratosphere. That wasn't a dance. He was appeasing a dictator. And if this were any other president, your party would be absolutely outraged that he did such a thing. So I'm so amazed that that is what you went to. And it's not even just the Korea thing. If we're talking about Gaza, that was happening while Trump was in office. This is an issue that's been going on for centuries. It's just not as on social media as it was as it is now.
Hamas didn't rise up and murder Israelis at a peaceful concert. I mean, the initial violence was this rising of Hamas against Israeli citizens at a Woodstock-like event.
But so what happened before when they were rising up to doing that?
In the Middle East,
not tensions,
forever.
fights, conflicts.
There's been conflicts in the Middle East.
So let's use the right words.
For time immemorial.
Well, we have to leave that there for now.
Right, exactly. Jaquetta and Wendy, stay put. We're going to come back to you. We also want to bring in Dante Scala, political science professor at the University of New Hampshire here.
We want to take a look at this Israel-Gaza issue through a domestic political lens. Of course, younger people have been among the most outspoken critics of the president's support for Israel. How problematic do you think this is for President Biden, with some polls showing that he's really struggling with younger voters?
Yeah, polls have been very strange along kind of lines of age so far. I mean, we're seeing that Biden is doing well among older voters and doing poorly among younger voters. And I think survey researchers are trying to sort this all out. Is the problem that it's so hard to reach young people these days? And I know that myself as a professor, but just, how do you reach them in order to ask them their opinions? A big question, though, is for young voters now, in college, maybe a little bit older, do they look at Biden and Trump and say, well, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other? The way that some people back in 2000 said, well, George Bush, Al Gore really doesn't make much of a difference. I mean, maybe some people would be surprised to hear me say that, but I think, Trump's been out of sight, out of mind somewhat over the last few years. It'll be very interesting to see how young people react to the choice and whether they're sort of indifferent to the choice.
I want to pivot back to a topic we were speaking about a little bit earlier, just about abortion rights. It's been a tough issue politically for Republicans since the Dobbs ruling. How do you suspect this is going to play out in the presidential race, or even when it comes to the race for governor up in New Hampshire?
Abortion is one big reason why the Trump era has been so bad for Republicans in New Hampshire, especially running in federal elections for Congress and for president. There are a lot of suburban, well-educated, prosperous voters, especially women, who are reacting against the overturn of Roe. And what they do is, they hear Trump is saying, let states sort things out. I think what they're hearing and what Democrats are saying is, you're just one law away from having your rights restricted, right? Roe is gone. And now the state legislature, one election could turn everything topsy-turvy. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think evangelicals, conservative white evangelicals, are going anywhere, even if they're a little unhappy with Trump's statement. But I don't know how much it does to paper over things for those suburban women. Maybe, they are independents and so forth.
All right, let's bring it back home to New Hampshire. Of course, going to elect a new governor this November. Governor Chris Sununu is leaving office. One of the leading Republican candidates, Kelly Ayotte, has been running what I will call an anti-Massachusetts campaign. If you go to her Twitter feed, it's filled with pot shots at Massachusetts over taxes and migration. She says New Hampshire is one election away from turning into Massachusetts. My question is, what the heck? What is turning us into this boogeyman? Why is it suddenly anti-Massachusetts is such a good tactic for her campaign to win in New Hampshire, where 100,000 people travel to come here every day to work, and we own homes and we go there. We're all one big happy family. What is she doing?
To me, I mean, it's you say suddenly. To me, it's same as it ever was. I mean, I moved up to New Hampshire about 25 years ago. And I remember hearing quite vividly people wondering why New Hampshire was turning from red to purple. And guess who they blamed then? Massachusetts. They said all these Massachusetts liberals are moving north up I-93, living in New Hampshire and turning our politics Democratic. So one thing I've learned about New Englanders is they are suspicious of people from outside the region, but they're outright disdainful of each other right across the borders, one from another. So I think Ayotte is this I don't know that the election's going to be decided on that, especially in the primary, but I think this is just kind of standard, something you throw out there. And it certainly has gotten the attention of you all down in Boston now.
I was going to say, well, she certainly fired up Sue O'Connell here about the issue. Do you think this is effective when it comes to voters? Are they listening to this?
I think it's a start in the sense that, when you're Kelly Ayotte, you're really delicately walking through a bit of a minefield when it comes to the Republican Party in New Hampshire, because that party has changed quite a bit over the last 8 years since she ran and lost the U.S. Senate seat because of Donald Trump and her kind of conflicted stance toward Donald Trump. So what she's trying to do now with a party that's only become Trumpier and Trumpier over time is to find some kind of common denominator between her and these Republicans who have changed quite a bit over the last decade. And again, when in doubt, go with the old reliable and, kind of raise suspicions about our state changing to become like our neighbor to the south. But that papers over some real kind of questions about how Ayotte will sit with the Republican base.
Dante Scala, thank you so much for joining us, sir. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Of course. So let's bring in Jaquetta and Wendy again. And Wendy, I sort of want to pivot to you. You've been on campaigns before. What do you make of this Ayotte tactic here?
I love this tactic. I think it's brilliant. Not only do I think it's brilliant for Kelly, but as we move into the presidential season, I think it's great for New Hampshire Republicans and to bring the Republican message back.
But why?
Why? Because New Hampshire is known for being independent. Don't tread on me. People move to New Hampshire because they want a bigger yard. They don't want to look at their neighbor. People move to New Hampshire because they want the gun in the shed so they can shoot at the critters in the yard. It's a very different and much more Republican lifestyle. She's building a tribe. She's getting everybody together. She's giving them a common enemy in a way that doesn't make any of her voters angry. There's nobody sitting up in New Hampshire going, I love Massachusetts. I respect Massachusetts. I want to be like Massachusetts. That's
Until
not
payday.
happening.
Until payday.
Yeah, right. When they drive over here.
They still don't like paying the taxes, though, right?
That's
Am I
right.
overreacting here? Because to me, it's just outrageous. We have such a New England region here where we work together. It's been driving me absolutely crazy. We have world-renowned colleges. We have great public schools. We have some of the best healthcare facilities, which many people travel to Massachusetts to get. We have marriage equality, which is the first in the nation, the birthplace of many, and we're one of the safest states in the United States. Am I overreacting here?
I love when you get a little Julia Sugar.
That's right. Yeah.
I do. I love when you do that.
begins,
Yes. I don't know why she's targeting, and I think it's personal. I feel like she's targeting Mara, and it's like, listen, I think her message is, we don't want to be a state where you're overtaxed. It's kind of tinier, and there is some, I want to live far away from my neighbor. But what I think she misses is that we have world-class gateway cities here. There are reasons why people come to Massachusetts to get educated, to become doctors, to give out, to just have a space where I can have an urban feel inside of a neighborhood that may look suburban. So I think she's missing the mark. It's like, you're not talking to New Hampshire voters. You're talking to people in Massachusetts, and you're getting us riled up, and we will beef. We'll throw hands if we have to.
I just can't wait for all the Republican governors from Massachusetts to call her, like Charlie Baker and Romney and Swift and all Salucci.
Right. I feel a little, it's
they
personal.
built the state, and she's dissing it.
Personal. Right.
The Republicans built it.
Right. All right, let's finish with one last topic. It is Sunday. Tomorrow, former President Trump is going to face his first criminal trial in New York City. I am going to be there for that. We're going to have coverage here on NBC 10 Boston. But I wanted to get both of your perspectives on this, and I guess the impacts that you think this is going to have on the presidential race as we go forward. Let's start with you, Wendy.
I think that the lawfare going on against President Trump has been very effective to cement his base. It's what's driven out every other Republican candidate in the primary. I don't have a great feel for how it's going to play with the middle voters who he's speaking to now. But the last time he was in New York and was tried, that ended up looking like quite a sham, as it was all about, he valued his building differently than the bank.
Well, it's a shame that he was found guilty for, though.
It was, and imagine what's happened to our justice system, that something that happens every day in the investment world, where you have a valuation and the bank accepts the valuation, and then it goes south within...
Well, as a mother, I would say, just because everyone does it doesn't make it right. Maybe we need more investigation of business people and how they are lying to banks and robbing taxes from citizens.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that people are fully in agreement with that. It felt very much like a political hit on President Trump, and we'll see how it goes next week. They feel like political hits.
I think you're so sweet, and I adore you. But this hypocrisy of your... Listen,
well, I am not a hypocrite.
No, not you.
I was going to say
hypocrisy
she's not
of
sweet.
Your party is interesting. This man is making a mockery of the very justice system and law and order that you all use as a core facet in when you talk to voters. Now, he's monetizing his court trials as if it's just an everyday thing. It is not okay to say to the government, this is what my building is worth, and this is what I'm going to pay. Anybody else, any citizen in America, we have to pay taxes on April 15th. Do you think the IRS is going to allow me to say, well, yeah, you know, the house I live in, I paid $780,000 for it, but I'm going to, it absolutely is. I don't go around to break the law. And if you are the party of law and order, this man is breaking the law. He deserves to be held accountable. You have to stop with it making it okay for him and not making it right for everybody else, or calling into judgment everyone else when it's your party saying this is how we want to do it when it's our guy. That is not fair. That's not how you should operate, and that's not a core family value.
We cannot criminalize losing elections. It's killing us.
We didn't.
As a
you
society.
did. Your party did.
That's not.
And we've
at
already
all
seen the
accurate.
evidence of that. We've seen fake electors come out and say, yes, I was duped. Your party did that. When it didn't go your way, you had a tantrum. And now you want to say to us that it's
had a tantrum.
more, absolutely he
Clinton
did.
had a
She certainly did. But we did
This is
not.
big stuff.
We
with
didn't
a lot
cause a
on the
riot.
table.
We didn't cause a riot about it.
No, I don't know.
Oh, okay. Well, we do.
We'll have to leave that there.
The spirited conversation ended. Thank you both for coming in. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Up next, I'll bring you part of my one-on-one conversation with Congresswoman Katherine Clark from her position in the Democratic leadership in the House. How does she view the dysfunction in Republican leadership? That's up after the break. History tomorrow in Manhattan as Donald Trump will become the first former president to be criminally prosecuted.
Mr. Trump faces 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. The trial is tied to the alleged hush money payments made on Trump's behalf to adult film star Stormy Daniels.
Now, prosecutors claim that Trump orchestrated a broader scheme to influence the 2016 presidential election by purchasing damaging stories about him to keep them under wraps. Our legal analyst, Michael Coyne, says prosecutors face a challenge in convincing jurors on the credibility of some witnesses.
You know, trial lawyers have an old adage that if you're going to try the devil, you go to hell to get the witnesses. And the witnesses in this case all carry significant baggage, and they will be cross-examined on those issues. Even Stormy Daniels, she has disavowed these activities in the past. She will be impeached with those prior statements. The jury at the end of the day has to decide whether these witnesses are credible.
Jury selection begins tomorrow. I'm going to be live in Manhattan tonight with live reports previewing the case, and of course tomorrow also giving you all the insight we have from inside the courtroom.
In the meantime, buckle up for more chaos in Washington. House lawmakers could vote on an aid package to Ukraine as soon as this week.
Yeah, so far, House Speaker Mike Johnson has refused to allow the vote. Some House Republicans have threatened to end his speakership if he chooses to do so. Spoke exclusively with the House Democratic whip, Congresswoman Katherine Clark, to find out how she views this turbulent moment. A two-week recess.
We're part of a community.
Comes to a close. House lawmakers back in Washington, including Democratic whip Katherine Clark, wrapping up her time in district and touting $900,000 in child care investments.
Is coming right here to Smock in Framingham to this child care center that serves 300 children.
But on Capitol Hill,
it's more of a warning and a pink slip.
Drama is already beginning to bubble up. Georgia Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene threatening to oust Speaker Mike Johnson after he worked with Dems on spending bills and promised Ukraine funding would come up for a vote. Do you have any faith that that is actually going to happen when you return?
You know, we are going to see. Speaker Johnson has made that commitment, but we are still short on details.
If he does bring it forward, some members of his party have said that they might challenge his speakership, challenge his job. Is there any scenario where Democrats come to his rescue?
Their willingness to throw Congress into chaos, to take down another speaker, we'll see what they do. I don't predict their behavior.
Is there trust in Speaker Johnson, in his word? I mean, do you have trust that he's going to do what he said he was going to do?
You know, I have no reason to disbelieve Speaker Johnson.
And while Democrats weigh how they'll approach Republican inter-party squabbles, Clark isn't mincing words about the importance of supplying Ukraine with those needed dollars.
We are going to continue to push that we do this quickly, that we bring this for an up or down vote. We'll see what the GOP has in mind.
So just a few things to watch for. Sue. That's all I would say. A lot going on. Next week, we are going to welcome the Dean of the New Hampshire Congressional Delegation, Senator Jean Shaheen. Is going to join us to discuss a host of issues, including the war in Ukraine, her work to tackle child care costs, and her experiences in politics over the past 5 decades. Thanks for joining us. I'm Matt Pritchard.
And I'm Sue O'Connell. Enjoy your day.